Hey people, I'm about to make my way through the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, talking about every film's what I like about them. So the first MCU film is Iron Man. So in April 1990, there were plans for Iron Man film. There was going to be a low-budget Universal Studios Iron Man film with an origin story, and MODOK would be the main villain. The movie would be directed by Stuart Gordon and written by Jeff Vinter and Stan Lee. 20th Century bought the rights on February 1996. Nicolas Cage and Tom Cruise was interested in playing the role. Cruise wanted to produce it. President of production at Fox, Tom Rothman, gets credited for screenplay when he understands the character. Jeffrey Kane was hired to rewrite the script, so did Quentin Tarantino, who was going to replace Stuart Gordon as the director, but then the rights got sold to New Line Cinema. Because the script was strong and there's too many Marvel films planned, they had to put the film on hold, so in July 2000, there was plans for a New Line Iron Man film written by Ted Elliott, Terry Rossio and Tim McCanley, who came up with an idea of Nick Fury's cameo, which is cool. There was talks of Joss Whedon to direct the film. David Hayter, David S. Goyer and Mark Protasevich wrote the scripts, then Jeff Vinter and Alfred Goh and Miles Miller reworked the script. They included the Mandarin and Pepper Potts, but then the Mandarin got removed and used Howard Stark as the War Machine to be the villain. David Hayter said, "You want to try to mirror your hero with your villain as much as possible," for his reasoning behind making Howard the villain, which is an interesting idea. Bethany Cape would have been the love interest over Pepper. Nick Cavasides would have directed the film, but it got cancelled and the rights of Iron Man got brought back to Marvel. So Marvel Studios worked the film by scratch, and Iron Man is the top priority, as he hasn't made it to live-action film at the time. Jeremy Latcham, associate producer, says they went after about 30 writers and they all passed. They were uninterested in the project due to both relative obscurity of the character and the fact it was solely a Marvel production. Apparently in early scripts of Spider-Man 2, it said that Stark created Doc Ock's mechanical arms in order to build the general public's awareness of Iron Man and elevate him to the same level of popularity as Spider-Man or Hulk. Marvel conducted focus groups trying to find a way to remove the general perception that the character is a robot. Tim Miller and Blur Studio produced the shorts of Iron Man advertorials. In April 2006, Jon Favreau got hired to direct the film, working with Avi Arad on Marvel again, as they did in 2003 Daredevil film. Favreau found the opportunity to create a politically ambitious ultimate spy movie taking inspiration from Tom Clancy, James Bond and Robocop, and compared his approach to an independent film. If Robert Altman had directed Superman the movie and Batman Begins, he wanted to make Iron Man a story of an adult man literally reinventing himself after discovering the world is far more complex than he originally believed. Vietnam War origin got changed into Afghanistan to avoid period peace. In terms of the script, art marker Matt Holloway got hired to write it. Mark Fergus and Hawk Osterby wrote another version, and John August polishing the scripts. Comic book staff Mark Miller, Brian Michael, Joe Casenda, Tom Brevoort, Axel Alonso and Ralph Macchio gave Jon Favreau an advice on the script. Matthew Libashi got hired for cinematography. Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, who's a CEO of Stark Industries, a playboy and inventor who builds an armor in the cave. And I think Robert Downey Jr. is perfect casting. Jon Favreau said Robert's performance could make Stark a likable asshole and depicts an authentic emotional journey once he won over the audience after being impressed with his acting role in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Jon Favreau wanted the film to be believable by showing the construction of the Iron Man suit in 3 stages, so Stan Winston built metal and rubber versions of the armor. The Mark I design was supposed to look like it was built from spare parts. There was concern when the stuntman fell over inside it because back is less armoured than the front, so Stark uses his resources for a forward attack. Terrence Howard played James Rhodes, often being called Rhodey, is a friend of Tony Stark, an officer with the United States Air Force. Ann Layson, between the military and the Department of Acquisitions and Stark Industries, Terrence Howard did a great job. He got chosen by Favreau because he felt he could play War Machine in a sequel. He prepared for the role by visiting Nellis Air Force Base, where he ate with the pilots and observed HH-60 Pave Hawk rescue helicopters and F-22 Raptors. Terrence and his dad are the fan of War Machine and Robert Downey Jr. since they saw him in Weird Science. In the following films, Terrence got replaced by Don Cheadle, which I think he's great as well. It's a shame that we don't get to see Terrence in armour. Obadiah Stane, aka Ironmonger, is played by Jeff Bridges, who's Stark's mentor and a friend, but he becomes a villain to take over the company, and I think he did a great job as well. Jeff read the comics as a kid and liked Favreau's modern realistic approach, so Jeff shaved his head and grew a beard and researched the book of Obadiah and was surprised to learn retribution is a major theme in that book of the Bible. Apparently a lot of his scenes were cut because they wanted to focus on Stark. However, the writers felt Bridges' performance allowed the application of less is more when editing the film. The suit of Ironmonger was based on Stan Winston's larger animatronic version of armor, which is really cool. Gwyneth Paltrow played Virginia Pepperpot's Stark assistant and later Stark's love interest. Gwyneth asked Marvel to send her any comics they would consider relevant to her understanding of the character Pepper. She considered the character to be very smart, level-headed and grounded. Gwyneth also said she likes the fact that there's sexuality that's not blatant, and Jon Favreau wanted Potts and Stark's relationship to be reminiscent of the 1940s comedy, which is what Gwyneth considered to be fun in an innocent yet sexy way. Nice way of putting it. I think she's great as well. Sean Taub played Ho Yinsen, who's implanted electromagnetic to Stark's chest to keep the Chaparral shell shards that wounded him to save his life. He locks in the same cell as Stark and helped him build the first Iron Man suit. He's very likeable. His death scene is really sad.
Don't waste your life.
Farhan Tahir played Razor, the leader of the Ten Rings, which is a criminal organisation founded by Xu Wenwu, and I think he's great playing a villain. Paul Bettany voiced Jarvis, that stands for just a rather very intelligent system. I like that. It's an artificial intelligence created by Stark and controls the Iron Man suits. I thought Jarvis is pretty cool. He's based on two characters. One is a butler, Edwin Jarvis, but Favreau changed it to avoid similarities to Alfred Pennyworth, Batman's butler, and the other is heuristically operative matrix emulation rostrum, Homer for short, and we know why that got changed. Leslie Bibb plays Christine Everhart, Vanity Fair reporter. The director of film, Jon Favreau, plays Harold Happy Hogan, Stark's bodyguard who employed to drive him. And I think they're both great. Favreau seems pretty happy, if you get that joke. Clark Gregg played Agent Phil Coulson, who's an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., who becomes the main character in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series. He's fantastic. Samuel L. Jackson plays Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's amazing. Samuel is a fantastic actor. Him as Nick Fury is spot on. The character Nick Fury was created in Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos comic book as a cigar-chomping leader. There was Fox television movie, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., with David Hasselhoff playing him, which I think he did a great job as well. It was made to create a TV series, which sadly didn't happen. There was a time where George Clooney was considered for the role, but he turned it down because the character was too violent, which is fair enough. The Ultimate version of Nick Fury got created and made a debut in Ultimate Marvel Team Up, and he looks pretty badass. Fury was to appear in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, but he got replaced by General Hager, played by Andre Braugher, due to rights. So Jackson got offered the role. He signed a 9-movie contract to play Fury in the MCU films. Captain Marvel was his last film contract, but he continued playing him, which is great. So there's great opening with the army tanks driving through desert with AC/DC's Back in Black. And I think AC/DC's songs is great fitting for Iron Man. We have a nice selfie with Stark and the soldier. The sound of soldiers firing is nicely done. Tony Stark's chest bleeding is pretty grim, and I found it funny when Stark and Rhodey were on the plane and Rhodey refused to drink. However, they did and turned the plane into a disco.
Yes, two, please.
No, I'm not drinking. I don't want any.
That's what I'm talking about when I'm back. Hey, man, but you are mourning what you
Excuse me if I'm just a little bit distracted here.
No,
Tony's pose with missiles shooting is badass.
The Jericho.
Banging on the metal with the hammer is quite a tune. It's also pretty intense when Stark's armor is building up while the 10 rings are coming after him, but luckily Ho Yinsen risks his life to buy him some time. The bit where Pepper reached into Stark's chest is gruesome.
There's pus.
It's not pus, it's an inorganic plastic.
And it's pretty funny where Tony tries his first jetpack.
3, 2, 1.
I always wonder what it would be like on You've Been Framed.
This is the sort of thing that...
And we gotta love this theme. And his first flying scene. And where he gets armoured up. So iconic. I get a fright when Stain raised his voice at a scientist who appeared in Spider-Man Far From Home.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave!
The fight between Iron Man and Ironmonger is pretty cool.
Nothing's gonna stand in my way.
There's great effects and direction. We do have an iconic line at the end.
I am Iron Man.
Nick Fury's appearance at the after credits scene sets up the Avengers team, which is so cool.
Who the hell are you?
Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger initiative.
And I think the first Iron Man film is awesome, a brilliant start to the MCU. Robert Downey Jr. has great chemistry with his co-stars. Next film to talk about is The Incredible Hulk. So there were plans for Hulk 2 with Eric Bana as the titular protagonist. It would feature the Grey Hulk. The main villains would be Abomination and the leader. Marvel wanted the Abomination because he's more of a threat to Hulk than General Ross. The movie would have been released in 2005. So then, 18th of January 2006, Avi Arad confirmed Marvel Studios would be providing the money for the Incredible Hulk's production budget with Universal distribution because they didn't meet the deadline for filming a sequel. The sequel got cancelled. There was arguments that 2003 Hulk movie was like a parallel universe, one-shot comic book, and their next film it needed to be Kevin Feige and really starting the Marvel Hulk franchise. I enjoyed the 2003 Hulk. We have the Incredible Hulk movie instead, where Bruce becomes a Hulk and he goes on a run from military to find a cure. The movie is directed by Louis Leterrier, who grew up watching Bill Bixby Hulk series and an interest in directing Iron Man film that Jon Favreau did instead. He did hesitate directing The Incredible Hulk at first because he wasn't sure if he could replicate Lee's style, but Marvel said that was not their intent, so he took the inspiration from Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Hulk, Ray replicating every comic book panel that he pinned up during pre-production from the many comics he browsed in the final film, and said that he'd planned to show Bruce Banner's struggle with the monster within him, while Kevin Feige added the film would explore that element of wish, fulfillment of overcome an injustice or a bully, and tap in a strength that you didn't quite realise you had in yourself. And Avi Arad said the movie would be a lot more of a love story between Bruce Banner and Betty Ross. The writer of a draft of the first film in 1996, Zach Penn, says the movie would follow up Hulk but stressed it would be more tonally similar to the TV show, and Bruce Jones run on the comic comparing his script to Aliens, not the first Alien movie, but still in the same continuity. He added 2 scenes in the 1996 script. That Bruce Banner would jump from a helicopter to trigger a transformation, and realising he is unable to have sex with Betty Ross, but studio ditched the draft, so Zach Penn wrote 3 drafts before leaving in early 2007. to work on the Grand movie, Leterrier noticed that the two films where Bruce was hiding South America are similar and that the film was a unique reboot. Audiences would have expected 40-minute origin story. There were talks of setting it in Thailand, but the director said he felt that the audiences were left restless waiting for the character to arrive in 2003 Hulk film that's directed by Ang Lee. Kevin Feige said, "I didn't want to tell the origin story again because they thought people were so familiar with it, which is why they didn't tell that. One reason they made Incredible Hulk was to get Hulk into the MCU canon. Leterrier wanted to name Columbia University into Empire State University to reference Peter Parker, but didn't happen because Spider-Man belongs to Sony." Not long after the film got released, Gale and Hurd, a producer, says they couldn't quite figure out how to term this. It's kind of reboot and it's kind of a sequel. A requel, a portmanteau of reboot, and sequel was a perfect description for the film, which is fair enough. When I first saw that trailer, I was about 9 and I thought it was a sequel to the 2003 Hulk movie. The new origin story is similar to Ultimate Marvel comic book. Bruce Banner in this movie is played by Edward Norton, nuclear physicist and biochemist who got exposed to gamma radiation and turns himself into a green monster with anger called the Hulk. Now, I think Edward Norton is great, and it's a shame that he didn't come back for the Avengers, but I think Mark Ruffalo is great too. Ironically, he was considered for the role. David Duchovny was considered also. Norton got picked due to his performance in Primal Fear and Fight Club, and reminded Kevin Feige of Bill Bixby's Hulk, plus he was a Hulk fan and picked Bixby and the comics his favourite versions of the character. Norton was considered for the role in Ang Lee's Hulk film but turned it down because he didn't like the script. So when he met Louis Leterrier and Marvel, he really liked the script. However, he wrote some scenes in the script, such as removing Rick Jones, turning down S.H.I.E.L.D's presence. He added Bruce's attempts to extract a cure from a flower, and emailing with Samuel Stearns referencing Bruce Jones' story. Lou Ferrigno voices Hulk, which I think he's awesome. He previously voiced Hulk in the 1996 animated series, and he had a cameo as a security guard in this movie. He was bribed by Banner with a pizza. Originally, Hulk was going to have only one line, which is Betty, but he was aware that fans wanted him to speak normally, so Leave Me Alone and Hulk Smash got added. Betty Ross is a cellular biologist and Bruce's girlfriend in this film, and I think Liv Tyler has a great chemistry with Edward Norton as she plays a caring girlfriend. Liv Tyler was attracted to the love story in the script and was a fan of the TV show because of the humanity and what Bruce is going through. She got a call about the role while driving herself home after a day without reading the script. So her and Norton spent hours discussing Bruce and Betty's life before he became the Hulk, and said that the filming part was very physical, which was fun, and compared her performances to a deer caught in the headlights because of Betty's shock at Bruce's unexpected return into her life. Tim Roth played Emil Blonsky, who's a Russian officer in the UK's Royal Marines Commando, and he gets injected with a serum and became a villain strong as Hulk called Abomination. He's brilliant. Tim Roth took the role because he wanted to please his sons, who are comic book superhero fans, and he was a fan of 1970s TV show and found Louis Leterrier's work very dark and very interesting. Tim watched the 2003 Hulk film to prepare for the role but stopped because he did not want to be caught up in the controversy over its quality, and to compare himself to it, he suggested Blonsky to be a soldier, whereas in the comics, he was a KGB agent. Louis Leterrier is a fan of Tim Roth's work and said, "It's a great watching a normal Cockney boy became a superhero." But Marvel and Norton hesitated to cast him at first, while Ray Stevenson was in talks taking the part before he played the Punisher in the Punisher Warzone. Tim Roth prepared for the part by learning to fire guns and breaking into rooms with two experts, and he found it tough shooting the chases because to show Blonsky's aging he could not work out, especially found it difficult to run while pulled with a harness, which was used to show the injected Blonsky's 30 to 40 mile per hour running abilities. Cyril Raffaelli played some of his stunts. Roth enjoyed the motion capture, which reminded him of Fringe theatre, and he hired his trainer from Planet of the Apes to aid him in portraying the monster's movement, and he signed on for 3 more films. William Hurt played General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, the father of Betty Ross and US Army general, who plans to hunt the Hulk down. He's so good. Ross got casted by the director because he felt Ross is more physical, more explosive in this movie, and no actor goes from 0 to 100 as well as William, comparing the character to Captain Ahab, William's favourite superhero is Hulk, and so is his son. William Hurt found production very different from the typical pure anxiety of a studio film, finding it more akin to an independent film. He described Ross as humiliated by Hulk's coincidence. He actually sees and recognises that it's more developed than his own. Even though he's a patriot and a warrior for his country, he sacrificed much for that purpose, but at the expense at times of his humanity, which he occasionally recovers. It's also great to see him back in Captain America Civil War. Sam Elliott had an interest reprising the role from 2003 Hulk film. Tim Blake Nelson played Samuel Stearns, Greyburn College professor and a cellular biologist who finds a cure for Bruce Banner, and he then became a villain called the Leader and reprised the role in Captain America Brave New World with the use of prosthetics. Ty Burrow played Leonard Sampson, Betty's boyfriend, while Bruce has disappeared. Martin Starr plays Roger Harrington, aka Computer Nerd, who later becomes a teacher at Midtown School. There's great casting. The intro looked pretty grim, as it's like a horror film. Sorry, had to do that. The muscle scene looked pretty effective. Stanley has a cameo where he drinks a soda and drops the bottle because it made him ill. Which I have a theory that's the bit where he becomes Stan Hulk. That would have been awesome to see on the film. Bruce running away from soldiers was pretty intense. And the Hulk in the dark seemed pretty scary. I like the fight between Hulk and Ross, along with his army, with Betty trying to stop them. You get comic book vibes, which I love. And it's well directed. The taxi driver was pretty reckless.
Maybe you don't like a good ride?
I like the effects where Bruce turns into Hulk. And Samuel Stearns mutating is horrifying, and we gotta love a battle between Hulk and Abomination. It's really iconic. I get goosebumps in the ending scene where Bruce's eyes turns green. And we have a cool cameo of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark.
What if I told you we were putting a team together? Who's we?
Lots of great stuff in there. Edward Norton thought a lot of stuff was left out of the film because it had been envisioned as multiple parts. With this film it ended as Chapter 1. He chose not to reprise the role because he wanted more diversity with his career and did not want to be associated with only one character, so Mark Ruffalo took over. And it's pity that there's no Hulk 2. There were options to be based on Planet Hulk and World War Hulk. James Gunn had an interest directing the sequel, but his project never entered developed due to conflicts with Universal. Next movie to discuss is Iron Man 2. Just after the first Iron Man got released, Marvel Studios announced the second film releasing on 30th of April 2010. Jon Favreau signed on to direct, and Justin Theroux signed to write the script, based on a story written by Favreau and Downey. Yendi Tartakovsky storyboarded the film, and Adi Granov returned to supervise the designs for Iron Man's armor. Originally, Jon Favreau planned to create Iron Man trilogy, but he directed the first two instead. There were plans for Jeff Bridges as Ironmonger for sequels after Favreau had a meeting with Mark Miller and a few other comic book writers. Ironmonger became the villain just for the first film. Originally, Mandarin was going to be the next villain, but Mark felt he was too fantastical. There was discussions about versions of Mandarin and the story of S.H.I.E.L.D. continuing, so instead Stark's alcoholism gets explored, but not the demon in the Battle comic version, It's instead to be about the interim space between the origin and the demon story arc. Shane Black gave some advice on the script and suggested to Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. that they model Stark on J. Robert Oppenheimer, who became depressed with being the destroyer of worlds after working on the Manhattan Project. After previous version of the story was to have Justin Hammer creating different villains in addition to Whiplash, like Ghost, but the idea got rid of those cast from the previous films reprised the role. Robert Downey Jr. said on being hero is kind of heroic, but really kind of on his own behalf, so there's probably a bit of imposter complex. And no sooner, and has he said, I am Iron Man, that he's now really wondering what that means. If you have all this cushion like he does, and the public is on your side, you have immense wealth and power, he felt he's way too insinuated to be okay. Davin Ronson played young Tony Stark, which I think he did a great job. Gwyneth Paltrow said when they start Iron Man 2, Pepper and Tony are very much in the same vibe as the movie processes. Pepper is given more responsibility and she's promoted, and it's nice to see her sort of growing up in that way, and it really suits her. The job fits her really well, which I do agree. Sam Rockwell, who considered for the role as Tony Stark in the first film, in this movie played Justin Hammer, who manufactures rival weapons, and I think he's great as Justin Hammer. Sam Rockwell has never heard of him before. He was contacted about the part and was unaware Hammer is an old Englishman in the comics. He described his character as plucky comic relief, but he's got a little bit of an edge. And also he said he works with Jon Favreau in the film called Made, and Justin Theroux, who wrote the script, is an old friend of his. So they sort of cooked up this idea and pitched it to Kevin Feige. That they did. They were maybe going to do one villain like they did with Jeff Bridges, but they decided to split the villains and made Whiplash as the main villain. James Rhodes, aka War Machine in this movie and beyond, is played by Don Cheadle, and I think he's great as Rhodey. Entertainment Weekly reported that Terrence Howard was offered a 50 to 80% pay cut for Iron Man 2. However, it said that it was uncertain that whenever Terrence Howard turned down the role, or whenever Marvel withdrew their offer, following the contract's dispute between Howard and Marvel Studios. Don Cheadle only has few hours to take the role, and he was unaware of Rhodey's storyline, and he thought Iron Man was a robot before the first film came out, despite that he's a comic book fan. Then again, I was a Marvel fan since I was 7, but during that time I've never heard of Guardians of the Galaxy and Eternals until they announced the films. Scarlett Johansson played Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, who's a spy, assassin, and a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. She's perfect for the role. Emily Blunt was considered for the role, but she didn't take it, as she was busy working on Gulliver's Travel film, so Scarlett Johansson took it with her deal including options for multiple films. Mickey Rourke played Ivan Vanko, also known as Whiplash, who's a Russian physicist, and I think he's badass. Michael Rourke researching the role, suggesting that half of the character's dialogue be in Russian with the addition of tattoos, gold teeth, and fondness for a pet cockatoo, paying for the teeth and birds with his own money, and said that he did not want to play one-dimensional bad guy and wanted to challenge the audience to see something redeemable in him without knowing anything about computers. Rourke described pretending to be tech-savvy as the hardest part of the role. The character is a mixture of Whiplash and Crimson Dynamo, which is cool.
I want my bird.
This is a great bird.
It's a beautiful.
We got this all the way from Russia.
A man, please not my bird.
John Slattery played Howard Stark, Tony's father, an inventor, scientist, engineer, businessman, and movie director who founded Stark Industries and worked on many government projects during World War II. And I think he did a great job as well. Max Favreau, the director's son, plays Peter Parker, a kid wearing an Iron Man mask being saved by Tony Stark.
Nice work, kid.
John Watts, who directed the MCU Spider-Man films, confirmed that it was Peter Parker, and Tom Holland gave him support, which is really cool. There's great casting. I love the fact that they use AC/DC songs again for Iron Man's theme. It really does fit in. Also, Stan Lee gets mistaken as Larry King.
Larry King. Larry!
Throwing hologram is pretty neat.
Boy Scouts of America?
Yes, it is a worthwhile organization. I didn't physically check the crates, but...
Watching Tony Stark racing is a blast. The bit where Whiplash attacks was pretty intense. As Iron Man throws a party, we get an awesome scene where War Machine crashes it.
I'm only gonna say this once.
Get out.
I love the Iron Man vs War Machine bit.
You want to be the War Machine? Take your shot.
Put it down.
You gonna take a shot?
Put it down.
No! Drop it, Tony! Take it!
My favourite line in this movie has got to be Nick Fury at the donut shop.
Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to exit the donut.
Oh, I love it. You gotta love Samuel L. Jackson. It's a nice Easter egg of Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer in the after credit scene.
Sir, we found it.
Which means a setup for the Avengers. Justin Hammer does a great dance. Black Widow kicks ass. I like that they use the drumming music as the Iron Drones land. There's great action in this movie. The music by John Debney is awesome. As the after credit scene shows, the next MCU film to talk about is Thor. This movie is about Thor being banished from Asgard and exiled to Earth with his powers taken away. He needs to prove himself worthy while Loki plans to take over the throne. This film is directed by Kenneth Branagh, who I've known him as Lockhart from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. After Sam Raimi made Darkman movie, he imagined an idea for Thor. So he met Stan Lee and gave the concept to 20th Century Fox, but they didn't understand it, so the project was cancelled until 1997, when Marvel Studios was beginning to expand rapidly. The movie gained momentum after the success of the first X-Men film. Thor made for television was planned. UPN was in talks for releasing it. Excited by the prospect, they pushed for a script and considered Tyler Mane to play Thor, which I think he looked good for the part. In May 2000, Marvel Studios brought Arts and Entertainment to help finance it as a film, but project still had yet to be patronised by a studio. In June 2004, Sony bought the rights and David S. Goya was in negotiations to write and direct, although there were talks between Goya and Marvel in 2005. Goya was no longer interested, though at this point the film was still set to be distributed through Sony Pictures. In April 2006, a year the film got announced, a writer who's a fan of the Thor comic books, Mark Protosevich, and the project moved to Paramount Pictures. After acquired the rights from Sony, Protosevich describes his plans for it to be like a superhero origin story, but not one about a human gaining superpowers, but of a god realizing his true potential. It's the story of an Old Testament god who becomes a New Testament god in 2007. Marvel Studios considered Matthew Vaughn to direct the film. He rewrote Protosevich's script in order to bring down the budget to $150 million, as Protosevich's first script would have costed $300 million to produce. After the first Iron Man movie came out and it succeeded, Thor was originally to be released on June the 4th, 2010, as his hammer got introduced in Iron Man 2. On May 2008, Matthew Vaughn was released when his holding deal expired, at which point Marvel said Protosevich to work on a new script and began searching for a new director. Guillermo del Toro, who's a fan of Jack Kirby's comics, was in talks to direct the film and said that he loved the character of Loki. but wished to incorporate more of the original Norse mythology into the film, including a really dingy Valhalla with Vikings and mud. Although he turned down Thor to direct The Hobbit, on September 2008, DJ Kurosawa had been discussing taking on the project, though he did not read the script, so later on, Kenneth Branagh confirmed to direct the film, describing it as a human story right in the centre of a big epic scenario, and he also said that he hoped to begin filming in January 2010. And Marvel Studios set back the release date of the film from 16th of July 2010 to 17th of June 2011, which is almost a year later. These characters from previous films returned. Thor Odinson is played by Chris Hemsworth, who's a god of thunder and lightning, and Prince of Asgard, and I think he's perfect for the role. Daniel Craig was considered for the role, but he turned it down as he was busy working on James Bond franchise. The actors who were considered for the role are Channing Tatum, Paul Levesque, Charlie Hunnam, Tom Hiddleston, Alexander Skarsgård, and Joel Kinnaman. Liam Hemsworth auditioned for the role, so Chris Hemsworth was in negotiations to play the part, after a back-and-forth process in which the 25-year-old actor turned down early on, then given a second chance to read for the part, and he said that he gained 20 pounds for the role by eating non-stop, and revealed that it wasn't until Thor that he started lifting weights. It was all pretty new to him. Natalie Portman plays Jane Foster, astrophysicist and Thor's love interest. She took the part because of Branagh's direction, and I think she's great as Jane Foster, especially when she later became Mighty Thor. Tom Hiddleston plays Loki Lufeson, Thor's adopted brother and god of mischief, and I think he's perfect as well. The actors who were considered for the role are Josh Hartnett and Jim Carrey. So Tom describes the character as a comic book version of Edmund in King Lear, but nastier. He had to keep strict diet before the start of filming because Branagh wanted Loki to have a lean and hungry look, like Cassius in Julius Caesar. Physically he can't be posing as Thor, and he also took the inspiration from Peter O'Toole in The Lion in Winter and Lawrence of Arabia. Dakota Goyo and Ted Alpress played young Thor and Loki, which I think they did a great job. Stellan Skarsgård played Eric Selvig, a scientist who's researching in New Mexico and met Thor, and I think he's great as well. Skarsgård said that he was not familiar with the comic book version of Thor. He accepted the part because of Kenneth Branagh and he loved the script. Most of the cast accept the part because of Kenneth Branagh's direction, which is definitely fair enough. Anthony Hopkins plays Odin, who's the ruler of Asgard, Thor's father and Loki's adopted brother, and I think he's incredible. He didn't know anything about the comics. What he said about the film is that a superhero movie but with a lot of Shakespeare thrown in, and he's very interested in relationship between father and son. Mel Gibson was considered for the role. Idris Elba played Heimdall, a sentry of Bifrost Bridge. He took the role because of Branagh and said that he did a green screen for the first time. He wouldn't have liked to do a whole movie of green screen because you'd forget the plot, which is fair enough. And I think he's awesome as well. Colm Feore plays Luthor, king of frost giants and Loki's father, and I think he's great as well. It took 5 hours for his makeup to apply. He said the Shakespearean training he shared with Hopkins and director Branagh helped keep the production moving briskly. Ray Stevenson, who plays Punisher in Warzone, in this movie plays Volstagg, a Warrior 3, and I think he did a great job as well. He works with Branagh before in The Theory of Fight, and he had to wear a fat suit for the movie and said he's got every bit of that. Falstaffian verve and Vega, and a bit of beer guts to suggest that enormous appetite, but he's not the sort of weeble-shaped figure he's in the comics. He's Falstaff with muscles. Kat Dennings played Darcy Lewis, a scientist. I really love that character. She described her as Jane Foster's little helper gnome, which is a nice way of putting it. She said that her role was expanded during the rehearsal process and that she's very Scooby-Doo. I like that. Rain Russo plays Frigga, Odin's wife and Thor's mother, and I think she's great as Thor's Karen mother. Jeremy Renner plays Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye and Archer, and I think he's amazing as a superhero archer and a Karen husband and father. When Kevin Feige finds out Marvel still owned the rights to the core members of the Avengers, including Hawkeye, Feige professed fanboy envisioned creating a shared universe just as creators Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had done with their comic books in the early 1960s. Jensen Ackles was considered for the role, but then Jeremy Renner took it. Josh Dallas played Fadril, a Warrior 3, and Stuart Townsend and Zachary Levi were considered for the role, so they got replaced by Dallas. Tadao Buosono plays Hogan. A Warriors 3 identifies by his grim demeanour as the only member who's not an Asa. Jamie Alexander plays Lady Sif, who's friends with Thor since childhood. And a Warrior, the actress, is best known for Jessie XX, Kyle XY series, and said that she was familiar with Marvel Comics before having taken the part. Having grown up with four brothers, the part required hours a day in the gym, though training is not unfamiliar to her, explaining she was one of the few girls on her Colleyville, Texas high school wrestling team. She also described her character as one of the guys and that she's a very talented, skilled warrior and can stand on her own against any villain in the film. About her relationship with Thor, she said she's very loyal to Thor and cares a lot about protecting him and protecting Asgard, and I think she's badass. There's amazing casting here. The direction by Kenneth Branagh is brilliant, and so is the music by Patrick Doyle. There's brilliant opening. The fight on Asgard is awesome.
That's more like it.
What was emotional is the way Odin punished Thor. It reminds me of Time Lords punishing the Second Doctor the same way in Patrick Troughton's final story.
Hi. Just taking a little blood.
How dare you attack the son of Odin!
Need some help!
The fight in hospital just shows that Thor can understand Earth humans. And I love Stanley's line in this.
Did it work?
Speaking of lines, my favourite line from this movie is this.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
This scene, I like it. Another! I enjoy the fight between Thor and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. When I first watched that, I was wondering if Thor could still carry his Mjolnir.
Last chance, sir.
Wait.
But sadly not. The battle is incredible. This movie also introduces Tesseract.
What is it?
Power, Doctor. If we can figure out how to tap it.
Brilliant setup. I really love the first Thor film, it's relatable. Next film to discuss is Captain America, the First Avenger. Seven years after the 1990 Captain America movie with Matt Salinger came out, Marvel was in negotiations with Mark Gordon and Gary Levinson to produce the film, and Larry Wilson and Leslie Bohem were set to write the script. Marvel teamed up with Arts and Entertainment to help finance the film in May 2000. However, a lawsuit arose between Marvel Comics and Joe Simon over the ownership of Captain America copyrights, disreputing the development process of the film, so eventually settled in September 2003 following the event. Marvel was preparing to license the film rights to Warner Bros. until producer David Maisel suggested that the company produce the film themselves. In 2005, Marvel received $526 million investment from Merrill Lynch, allowing them to independently produce 10 films, including Captain America. Paramount Pictures agreed to buy the rights for the film. This movie is originally a standalone. Kevin Feige, the producer, said about half the movie would be set during World War II before moving into modern day. Avi Arad said the biggest opportunity with Captain America is as a man out of time, coming back today, looking at our world through the eyes of someone who thought the perfect world was small-town United States. 60 years go by, and who are we today? Are we better? The inspiration was taken from Back to the Future trilogy, and someone in mind to be the star, and definitely someone in mind to be the director. Jon Favreau was originally to direct the film, but he chose to do Iron Man instead. In April 2006, David Self was hired to write the script and said that Captain America was his favourite superhero, as a child because his dad said to him you could one day be Captain America, which is nice. Joe Johnston confirmed to direct the movie, and apparently Captain America was put on hold during the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, although Marvel Entertainment reached interim comprehensive agreement with the Writers Guild of America that would put writers immediately back to work on various projects that were under the company's development in January 2008. Marvel announced the film to be titled Captain America the First Avenger for release on 6th of May 2011 before being pushed back to July the 22nd. Louis Leterrier looked at some of the concept art being created for the film and was impressed enough to offer his services, but he was turned down by Marvel, so Johnston directed the film instead. He hired Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely to rewrite. Kevin Feige said Johnston's directional work on October Sky and Rocket Eater and his special effects work on the original Star Wars trilogy to explain why he has appropriate choice. They took inspiration from Raiders of the Lost Ark because they hoped the film would not feel like a period piece. Kevin said Marvel is perceived pretty well around the world right now, and he thinks that putting another uber Marvel hero into the worldwide box office would be a good thing. They have to deal with much the same way that Captain America, when thawed from the Arctic ice, entered a world that he didn't recognize, after being asked whenever anti-US sentiments would affect the film's box office, similar to the way Stan Lee and Jack Kirby reintroduced the character in the 1960s. Avi Arad said Captain America stands for freedom for all Democrats, for hope all around the world. He was created to stop tyranny, and the idea of stopping tyranny is important today as it was then. Later, after the election of US President Barack Obama said the idea of change and hope has permeated the country regardless of politics, and that includes Hollywood. Discussions in all their development meetings includes the zeitgeist and how it's changed in the last 2 weeks. Things are being adjusted. The filming began on April 2010. Joe Johnston describes it as Rick Hendricks is production designing and they're set up down the Manhattan Beach, California. And he also says the invaders will appear in the entire second half of the film, which leads to fans speculate this was World War II era Marvel superhero team of that name. There was also speculations that Namor to appear. The design as a whole tried to create technology that could be built in 1940s, though with the added cube technology in Hydra's case, abandoned Nazi projects or actual vehicles from the period were used as inspiration. Daniel Simon, who helped designing many vehicles in Tron Legacy, was appointed lead vehicle designer. Johnston said Simon's book Cosmic Motors as a reason to trust his influence, saying he's sort of the guy he wanted to be. When he was designing stuff for Star Wars, those characters from previous films returned. Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, is played by Chris Evans, and I think he did a splendid job. A human that got himself a super soldier serum and became a superhero with a shield called Captain America. The cast who were considered for the role are Garrett Hedlund, Channing Tatum, Scott Porter, Mike Vagel, Sebastian Stan, Wilson Bethel, John Krasinski, Michael Cassidy, Chase Crawford, White Russell, and Jen Ackles. Sam Worthington and Will Smith were in talks, and Kellen Lutz, Ryan Phillip, and Alexander Skarsgård auditioned. Chris Evans, who previously played Human Torch in the Fantastic Four films, almost turned down the role, but his good friend Robert Downey Jr. convinced him to take it and said if the movie bombs, he's if the movie hits, he's He was scared. He realised that his whole decision-making process was fear-based, and you never want to make a decision out of fear, and I'm so glad he took it. Linda Dini is a body double in some shots for Steve Rogers, pre-transformation physic, and also appears as a bartender, and I think the effects is pretty effective. Hayley Atwell plays Agent Peggy Carter, who's an agent of Strategic Scientific Reserve in World War II, and one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's perfect, she's badass, especially as Captain Carter in What If and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Atwell has been training 6 days a week to make her a bit more military and make it convincing that she could kick butt, and said she likened her character to that famous Ginger Rogers quote, "She can do everything Captain America can do, but backwards and in high heels. She's an English soldier through and through. Although she always looks fabulous, she might stand there with a machine gun shooting Nazis, but she's obviously gone to the loo beforehand and applied a bit of a lipstick. She doesn't need to be rescued. That's exciting to her. Her strength, which is a nice way of putting it. At least they gave her a spin-off TV show. Hugo Weaving plays Johann Schmidt, aka Red Skull, head of advanced weaponry of Adolf Hitler, and commander of Hydra, the terrorist organization. He's so good in this. We even said that his patent, Red Skull's accent on those of Werner Herzog and Klaus Maria Brandauer, and he said the differences between Captain America and Red Skull are they both had the serum, and the serum seems to augment certain qualities that each of them have. Cap is much more in tune with other people, Schmidt is in tune with himself and his own needs and his own ego. From his point of view, they're quite opposite. Chester Phillips is played by Tommy Lee Jones, United States Army Colonel, who's the head of projects. Tommy describes Chester Phillips as one you've seen in 1,000 movies, the gruff, skeptical officer overseeing a team of talented, slightly sarcastic, specially talented soldiers, and I think he nailed it. Sebastian Stan plays James Buchanan, or Bucky Barnes, as we call him, is Steve's best friend and United States Army Sergeant. He was killed in action but got made into a brainwashed assassin with metal arm called the Winter Soldier. He's fantastic. What can I say that hasn't been said already? Sebastian Stan was rumoured to play Captain America but got casted as Bucky instead, and said that he did not know anything about the comic books but watched a lot of documentaries and films about World War II in preparation for the role, calling Band of Brothers very helpful. He also said Steve Rogers and Bucky are both orphans and kind of like brothers. They kind of grow up together and look after each other, and it's a very human, relatable thing. He also wanted to look out for how their relationship changes once Steve becomes Captain America. There's always a competition and they're always one-upping each other. He had paid attention to how Bucky is affected by Steve's change, and suddenly Steve is this leader. Dominic Cooper played young Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark, which I think he did a splendid job, looking like young Robert Downey Jr. Neil McDonough and Derek Luke plays Timothy Dum Dum Dugan and Gabe Jones, who are members of Rogers' squad of commandos. I think they're great. Stanley Tucci plays Abraham Erskine, a scientist who created the super soldier serum. What gave him the role is his opportunity to do a German accent, which was something he always wanted to try, and I think he did a great job of it. We also have Toby Jones, who plays Arnim Zola, a Nazi party, who's so good in this as well. Laura Haddock, who had a cameo where James Gunn jokingly said that she's Star-Lord's grandmother, which I like that. I think the cast in this film did an amazing job. The music by Henry Jackman is awesome. I love the opening in the snow. It's mysterious and you kind of get comic book vibes. I love the concept of Tesseract. There's amazing chemistry with Bucky and Steve as he helps him from the bullies.
Come on, man. Why last night? Gotta get you cleaned up. Why? Where we going? Future.
And we get a cool cameo of Jenna Coleman. This is a year before she was casted as Clara Oswald in Doctor Who. David Bradley is in the film as well, which is cool. Poor Steve, who couldn't join the army, but at least we get an iconic scene where he took the super soldier serum and gets himself a muscles and grown bigger. What I love about Steve in his costume on the stage with the dancers in the film is that they made it look 1940s, which is well done.
Who's strong and brave, here to save the American?
And also that black and white film kind of reminds me of the very first Marvel film, Captain America, that came out in 1944, starring Dick Purcell. Captain America's stealth was pretty intense. I like the hats he was wearing. It does remind me of concept art of Marvel Ultimate Alliance game, which is cool. The mask ripping off to reveal Red Skull is effective. And I think both versions of Red Skull, Hugo Weaving and Scott Pauling, are pretty terrifying. I love Stanley's cameo in this.
I thought he'd be taller.
It was also effective where Peggy shoots the metal shield. There's fantastic action with Captain America.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield.
The fight with Red Skull is a blast. And it's really emotional that Steve Rogers sacrificed himself by crashing the plane and Peggy thinks he's going to die. Plus he's got a dance to do. But at least he did eventually. The bit where Steve Rogers woke up and ran outside of New York City 70 years later. His acting is spot on.
You've been asleep, Cap, for almost 70 years. You gonna be okay?
Yeah, I had a date.
I love the fact that they put the Avengers trailer for the after credits scene. I think it's perfectly linked to the Avengers, and I think it's a brilliant film. Time to assemble because we're now on to the Avengers. 2003 is where the ideas of the Avengers film began, with Avi Arad, the CEO of Marvel Studios, first announcing plans to develop the film in April 2005 after Marvel Enterprises declared independence by allying with Merrill Lynch to produce a slate of films, with Paramount Pictures buying the rights. Marvel discussed their plans in a brief presentation to Wall Street analysts. The studio's intention was to release individual films for the main characters to establish their identities and familiarize audiences with them before crossing them over. In 2006, Zach Penn, who wrote The Incredible Hulk, became involved with the film. In the wake of 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, Marvel negotiated with the Writers Guild of America to ensure that it could create films based on its comic book counterparts, including Captain America, Ant-Man and the Avengers. The company set a July 2011 release date for the Avengers after the first Iron Man film got released and succeeded. Marvel Studios reached an agreement with Paramount, an extension of a previous partnership which gave the company distribution rights for 5 future Marvel films. Joss Whedon gets to direct the film. He gets praise from Kevin Feige and Avi Arad. Originally, the Wasp was going to be in the film, played by Zooey Deschanel. There was also a draft where Tobias Stane's son was going to be in it. Whedon noted that the characters used do not have the same issue. Unlike the X-Men, he felt these guys just don't belong together. Before realizing their interactions could be like the Dirty Dozen, he also referenced Dr. Strangelove, The Abyss, His Girl Friday, and Black Hawk Down. This movie is shot in New York. The cast from the previous films came back. Robert Downey Jr. said he initially pushed Whedon to make Stark the lead, which is fair enough as he started the franchise, and he's earned $50 million from the film. Chris Evans said that Steve Rogers is much darker in the Avengers and earned $2 to $3 million for the film. Chris Hemsworth has worked with Joss Whedon before in The Cabin in the Woods. Apparently Hemsworth said he was able to maintain the strength he built up for Thor movie by increasing the food intake, consisting of chicken breasts, fish, steak and eggs every day. When asked exactly how much, Hemsworth said his body weight in protein pretty much, and he earned $2 to $3 million for the film. When Scarlett Johansson talks about the relationship between her and Hawkeye, she said Black Widow and Hawkeye have a long history. They fought together for a long time in a lot of battles in many different countries. They're 2 members of the Avenging group who are skilled warriors. They have no superpowers. Black Widow is definitely one of the team. She's not in the cast simply to be romantic or eye candy. She's there to fight, so she's never felt like she was the only girl. They all have their various skills, and Scarlett felt it was equal. And I think it's a nice way of wording it. She's been trained with her stunt team and fighting actors for many months in terms of preparing for the role, and Scarlett earned $4 to $6 million for the film. Jeremy Renner said it was a very physical role and that he trained physically and protected archery as much as possible in preparation, and he's earned $2 to $3 million for the film. Samuel L. Jackson compared the Nick Fury to Paul Dole Robbie in Jackie Brown, describing a nice guy to hang out with. You just don't want to cross him. and he earned $4 to $6 million for the film. And I think it's nice to have Loki as the main villain, and Tom Hiddleston pointed out that Loki is a good idea to rule as everyone is busy worshipping him and there will be no more wars, so he will create some kind of world peace by ruling them as a tyrant. But he's also kind of deluded in the fact that he thinks unlimited power will give him self-respect. Clark Gregg said Whedon provided insight into his character's backstory, particularly about Coulson being a fan of Captain America. Mark Ruffalo in this movie and beyond plays Bruce Banner, aka Hulk, and I think he nailed it. It's a shame that Marvel and Edward Norton fell out, so he was no longer casted, which is why he didn't reprise the role. Ruffalo was a friend of Norton. He grew up with the Hulk series starring Bill Bixby, and he also earned $2 to $3 million for the film. Kobe Smulders played Maria Hill in Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think she's great as well. Apparently there was a cancelled Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman film with Kobe playing the part. Morena Baccarin was considered for the role also. The casts did a splendid job with their role. The direction and effects is awesome, and the music by Alan Silvestri is perfect fit-in, so iconic. It's pretty effective, opening with the close-up of Tesseract. And Loki gives me the goosebumps.
He is ready to lead. And our force.
I love the fact that they reuse AC/DC song for Iron Man. I do love Captain America's suit in this movie. Classic.
Put that hammer down.
Yeah, no.
Bad call. He loves his hammer.
You want me to put the hammer down?
The bit where Hulk is chasing Black Widow was pretty intense. What was pretty funny is where the police were copying what Captain America says.
Well, you keep them off the streets. I need a perimeter.
We need men in those buildings. Lead the people down and away from the streets. You got it. We're gonna set up a perimeter.
And when Hulk punched Thor, the scene with iconic lines that became memes are...
Listen well, brother.
I'm listening.
Not a great plan.
I'm always angry.
Puny God.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
And Hulk. Smash.
Superheroes in New York? Give me a break.
That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
The battle scenes in New York is well done. They must have spent a lot of money and time to put those scenes together. Agent Coulson's death scene is emotional, but at least he comes back to life and explained it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The bit where Iron Man is in space was intense, as we thought that he could die. But thankfully not, until the end game. The ending is superb. And especially the after credit scene where Thanos makes a first appearance. I really think it's a fantastic film. The budget for the movie is $220 million and $1,519 billion for the box office. This movie must have blown the audience away, as it's the first time that we see live action film with superheroes crossing over. This movie reminds me of Ultimate Avengers animated films, which I really loved as well since I was a kid.
I must know how to stop him.
You and I, we're after the same thing.
He thought he could do it alone, but to succeed, and all of the Avengers in the ultimate rematch.
Well, that's embarrassing.
That's Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 1. I imagine this would be a really long video if I did the entire Infinity Saga, so I think doing phases is a great way to space them out, and I'd love to do Phase 2 next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.